Hey guys. So some of you may be familiar with the 2003 documentary Shelter Dogs, a movie about the heart-wrenching truths of the unfortunate lives of animals in shelters. After watching Shelter Dogs, it truly inspired me to be part of a movement that encourages the well-being and safety of all animals. And in my documentary, Angels Behind Bars, I plan to continue to share the important message that Shelter Dogs shared with us 20 years ago. Shelter animals are not broken, and they deserve a chance at a happy life. What if I told you that 6 to 8 million animals enter shelters each year in the United States, and of that number, 40 to 50% of animals are euthanized? I've produced a documentary about the inside lives of animals in shelters and what we can do to help them. I made this documentary in Waco, Texas, where I interviewed the employees and volunteers at the Humane Society of Central Texas, families that have adopted dogs, and people that bring in these animals from the street. I chose this topic because I have personally seen the benefits of adopting a pet through my experience working with the animals at the Humane Society of Central Texas. And I believe that through this documentary, I will be able to convince people that adopting a pet through a shelter saves animals' lives, is cost efficient, and helps put a stop to inhumane breeding facilities. I began my documentary by discussing the overcrowding problems in the shelters that were discussed by the employees of the shelters. Animal overpopulation is a huge problem in the United States, and overcrowding is very common in shelters. And as a result, many of these animals are euthanized in order to lower these overcrowding rates. And adopting from a shelter helps reduce the amount of animals that are euthanized, and it also makes the scarce resources of the shelter available to other animals that are in need. Next, I interviewed individuals as they talked about their adopted dogs and their improved mental and physical state after being adopted. Some characteristics of long-term shelter dogs are that they're normally more aggressive, they're more anxious, and normally more fearful towards people. And these individuals who had adopted a dog talked about how the behavior of the dog improved immensely just with the proper amount of care and affection from their owner. The next thing I did was interview another employee at the Humane Society who discussed how adopting a pet is more cost effective than buying from a breeder or a pet store. Having a pet will likely require spay or neutering, microchipping, vaccinations, and when you buy an animal from a breeder or pet store, you're required to purchase these services outside of the price of the animal. However, adopting an animal from a shelter is more cost efficient because all of these services are actually included in the adoption price. The employee also discussed how you get a lifetime supply of resources when you adopt a dog from a shelter. Employees and volunteers are great resources for finding information on the animal's history or health issues. And in my personal experience of adopting a dog from a shelter, the shelter provided me with free food, dog toys, a collar and a leash, vaccinations, spaying. It was very, very nice. After doing some research on breeding facilities, I decided to film a portion of my documentary inside a breeding facility to see firsthand the atrocities and abuse that the animals go through. And adopting an animal rather than buying one helps put a stop to these animal breeding facilities. So just for some background, many breeding facilities will often produce animals in large quantities in order to sell them in stores, and these are often known as puppy or kitten mills, and there are actually tens of thousands of animals trapped in these puppy mills. When I was filming the documentary inside of the breeding facility, I saw so many animals in tiny cages with no access to fresh air or companionship, and they're bred very frequently. So adopting a dog helps to stop the contribution towards these puppy and kitten mill businesses. The another thing I learned in my research that I included in my documentary was that there's actually an outbreak of an antibiotic resistant disease in humans that is actually linked to the animals in these puppy and kitten mills. And this just describes one of the effects of not keeping the animals in a healthy environment. In order for the message of my documentary to make a difference, I need investors like you to make my documentary available for the general public to view on your popular platform, Netflix. I'm prepared to sell the rights of my documentary to your company for $130,000. You can help save these animals and put a stop to breeding facilities and the mistreatment of animals. Please be their voice. Thank you so much for listening.